I think so many times when I work with schools, myself included, and staff that I work with become frustrated because if only a family could react differently to a child, then send their child to school ready to learn. This child would have so much potential and so much ability to do well in school if only the home situation would change. And I think once we understand more about the dynamics of violence in a home, the dynamics of mental health or alcohol and drug issues in a home, that helps us gain more understanding about the perspective that the family and the child are coming from, but also helps us reach out to families in a respectful way, in a way that they can hear us and perhaps be open to our interventions and support. So looking at classroom strategies. Okay, first, classroom strategies to establish safety. We really want to have clear and consistent rules for managing behavior and setting limits. So a school-wide behavior program that is consistent among settings for a student, from place to place, from year to year for a child, is really helpful. I think that many of the kids that we're talking about have had home lives where the rules were inconsistent or rules were enforced in an arbitrary manner. So one time a behavior created one reaction in a caregiver and the next time a completely different reaction, which perhaps ended in them being hurt. And so the more consistent and firm that we can be in setting our limits, the better that it can be for children. That in mind, we have to walk a line with understanding their perspective and their accommodations. So if our behavior plan is around teaching social interaction skills, it's really centered around teaching new skills to these students rather than a strict punishment stance. That can be helpful. We can't assume that our students come to school with knowing the rules of social interaction. Don't make the assumption that they know how to behave, they just are choosing not to. That is a skill sometimes that we have to teach them because they didn't come in the door with that. And so if we have a consistent way for managing that aims at teaching skills to students, that can really be helpful for them. So accommodations to meet their individual strengths and needs is also important. If we have a predictable structure that builds relationships and we have a predictable environment for kids, that can help them to settle down. I know that there's a lot of really great things out there that schools are doing, responsive classroom, tribes I've heard people having success with. So some things that create ritual in a classroom that when a child is coming from a home that perhaps is not as positive, that he has a way to know, okay, this is my symbol that I'm in a safe place now. My school day is beginning. I know what's going to happen here. I'm not going to be hurt here. And ritual and having routine around that can be really, really supportive for a student. I think that, whenever we have to have changes in that ritual, that we can do as much as we can to support students through that and let them know that we're going to be with them and they're going to be safe is really helpful. Reducing bullying and harassment in schools. A lot of schools are really doing a lot of work around this, but if we, again, this goes back to school culture and school climate. If we create a climate in our school where bullying and harassment is not something that's tolerated, and that all the students in the school not only support a student in self-advocacy when they're being bullied or harassed, but they're also standing up side by side with that student and saying, this is not something that we do at this school. And if we can create that culture, that is really helpful in helping children who have experienced trauma to feel safe at school. And using seclusion and restraint only as a last resort. Many times, oftentimes when a child is secluded or restrained, we are actually reenacting the physical feelings that they have inside their body that occurred during a trauma. So I think it's really important for us to think carefully before we use seclusion and restraint and really only use it as a last resort because we don't know the damage that we could be doing to children in reenacting their trauma for them. Classroom strategies to establish empowerment. Like I said, we don't want to start a whole new initiative or give all new things on your plate. We know as educators you have a ton of things on your plate, a ton of responsibilities for teaching children. But I think that there is some really nice ways that we can embed mental health and trauma coping skills right into the curriculum. And I think if you sat for a moment and thought about it or worked with a group, you can think about different ways that teaching coping skills fits really nicely into some of the curriculum areas that we're already addressing in schools. So if we think about physical education, for example, that's a pretty easy one. If we can talk about how physical exercises is helpful in dealing with sadness, frustration, or when we're feeling overwhelmed, that if you run or exercise that you're going to feel better. And if we could just make those connections for kids. If we talk about expression of feelings through art and music, if we can talk about language arts and about journaling and writing poetry and putting ourselves in the perspective of someone in a story, how that helps us with our coping skills. And things that you might not even think about. For example, science and math. I've had a lot of kids that I've worked with that have been exposed to trauma that really love science and math because there's a predictable set of rules. There's a scientific method to it. They know when they got the right answer. So there's some predictability and safety and in those subjects that we can really connect those for kids as coping skills. And then when you think about history and world cultures, that again, we've got to connect kids to a larger sense of the world, that if they can think about themselves as connected to something larger, that really gives them hope for the future. On that same note, if you think about providing guided opportunities for meaningful participation in their community, in their world, many schools are doing service learning or are doing peer mentoring. That's a way to participate and help others. If we get students involved in larger philanthropic activities, you'd be surprised how many times the children who have been exposed to trauma are the first in line to participate in those because they want to connect with the rest of the world. They want to have a sense that there's something bigger, that there's a future for them out there. So if we can do those in ways where the children are supported and guided and it becomes a positive experience for that, that's very, very powerful for them. Maintaining high behavioral and academic expectations. I think about this one as not that children will rise to the level that we expect them to rise to, so that we maintain those high behavioral expectations. We're not saying, I know you've had a hard life, so I'm not going to have you do this. We instead say, I know you have had a lot of stress in your life, but you're strong and you can do this, and I'm going to support you to do it. So we're maintaining those high expectations, but we're supporting them through it. That's the foundation that I would love to see educators have with these children. And again, building on strengths, building on competencies, focusing on areas where children have interest, where they have success. I think when we get frustrated, oftentimes when we don't have a lot of impact over a home situation that might be chaotic or stressful for a child, one of the things that we can hang on to as educators is the idea of building competency. And I know I've looked at a lot of studies regarding resiliency, and people ask me oftentimes, if you have two children who are in the same home, been exposed to the same traumas, or have been exposed to similar traumas, and one makes it and is a successful member of society, and the other one is incarcerated or perpetrating abuse themselves, what's the difference? What happened between those two children? And the three things that come out, there's many, many factors that that you can find out about, but the three things that keep popping up for me is often a positive relationship with a mentoring adult, feeling of competency over multiple domains, so they feel like they're good at something. There's something that they can move on to and that they're going to be able to be successful in their lives. And then they have emotional regulation, so the ability to handle stress, overwhelming feelings. And I think about how powerful we are as educators, that we have the ability to give children those three things. We can be that mentoring adult, we can build competency in children, and we can teach them skills to manage their emotions. And so when we're feeling frustrated that we can't change a situation that a child is coming from, perhaps we can feel comforted in the fact that we can give them the resiliency factors that they need in order to be successful in life.